Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike. I'm a product manager at Meetup. Today, we have a special guest. We have psychologist and author of Happier No Matter What, Cultivating Hope, Resilience, and Purpose in Hard Times. We have Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar. Dr. Ben-Shahar will discuss the optimal conditions for learning, growing, becoming stronger in these times of uncertainty. We're going to talk through evidence-based tools that are meant to help us thrive personally and professionally. But before we get started, we're going to go over the guidelines and the agenda. A few things. This event's going to be recorded, but don't worry, you're not going to appear in the video and your audio will be muted, so you can only hear the panelists. The chat, that's the way we can kind of communicate in the Q&A. The chat for the event will be turned off. The Q&A will be on. But if you have any questions, submit them through that feature, the Q&A feature on the bottom of your screen. We're going to be addressing some questions later on. We also have closed captioning available. So on the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the live transcription icon. Click that icon and then select the preference for how you'd like to see this transcribed. So we'll do an introduction. We'll have a nice chat with Tal and then open it for Q&A at the end. So let me share a little bit about Tal. I'm really honored to be here with today. So Tal Ben-Shahar, he's the author and lecturer. He taught two of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology, and the psychology of leadership. So today, Tal consults and lectures around the world to executives in corporations across the world, general public, and at-risk populations. The topic he lectures on include leadership, happiness, education, innovation, ethics, self-esteem, resilience, goal setting, and mindfulness. A few things to think about as you think of your own questions that you want to ask. His books have been translated into more than 25 languages and have appeared in sellers list around the world. So I'm gonna stop sharing so we get more. You all can just see Tal and I. Welcome, Tal.
Thank you, Mike. So good to be here.
Tal, I need to tell you, we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but I'm so inspired. My job, I get to support people who organize community and help support them and how they come together. And this is something, your area of expertise is something that I've been wanting to learn more about. I'm a little bit of a noob, so I'm going to start with something kind of basic. I know Deepak Chopra, I know Oprah, I know my pastor. What is positive psychology and the science of happiness, and how does it fit into those things that I'm familiar with?
Yeah, so people have been talking about the happiness or the good life for from time immemorial, really. The distinguishing characteristic of the field that I'm in is that it focuses on science, on evidence-based interventions, on testing. So, when we, for example, in our workshops or our certificate programs, when we teach, what we teach is scientific evidence-based research, and then we also test our interventions. So it's all about science, and it's really the first time, I guess the last 20, 30 years is the first time when science and well-being meet.
It's something so personal and so intimate, and something that we see as something that we always can't control. But you're saying there's some way to there's certain patterns that we're starting to identify.
Very much so. I started off as a computer science major in college. So I've always been attracted to the sciences. And the reason why I shifted to this positive psychology was because I was unhappy and I wanted to figure out why. And writing code, didn't provide me the answer, even though I loved and still do love programming. So I looked with a very skeptical view for questions. It wasn't enough for me to just hear, someone very charismatic or someone who thought they had the answer. I really wanted evidence. And I still do, by the way, it hasn't changed, 30 years hence.
What's I think we're going to dig deeper into this, but as we're getting started, you're saying you were looking for answers. Tell me what are two of these, two or three of these kind of key facts or learnings that you found about happiness and psychology that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so the first one was right at the very beginning, and I must say, really baffled me at the beginning that I wasn't happy, because on paper I should have been happy. I was a student at Harvard, doing very well academically. I was an athlete. I played professional squash. Social life was okay. So I checked the boxes. I had an amazing summer job that promised a great job out of college. I checked the boxes, and yet every morning I would wake up, to put it mildly, unhappy. And it didn't make sense to me, because everything that I'd been told and taught was that it's success that will ultimately lead to happiness, that it's accolades that will ultimately lead to happiness. And it doesn't. And when I started to go in more depth, I realized that I wasn't the only one struggling with this. There's so many people who simply have the formula wrong. And that wrong formula is that success, achievement, getting to a milestone, achieving an objective, that is what will make us happy. It won't. At best, it will contribute to a temporary spike in our happiness. And when I say temporary spike, it comes from getting a job that we'd always dreamed of. So yes, we're ecstatic when we get it. And then very shortly after, we go back to where we were before. It applies to money. People who win the lottery. Yeah, of course they're ecstatic when they do, and they truly believe that their life will be different from now on. Yes, it is different for about a month or two. And it applies to even relationships. When we believe we found our princess or Prince Charming, and we think we'll live happily ever after. You could, but not because you found each other. It's for other reasons.
Tal, you're being a downer. You're being a downer. You're killing the vibe.
It's funny you say that. So when the book The Secret came out, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and so ever since the book came out, people have been asking me, tell us the secret to happiness. And my response is always, come on, secret to happiness? What do you take me for, some, self-help new age guy? I'm an academic. There's no secret to happiness. There are 3 secrets to happiness. And I'm going to give them to you right now. The first secret to happiness is reality. Second secret to happiness is reality. You want to hear the third one? Or yeah, reality. So, it's about reality, whether we like it or not. It is, and we need to make the best of what is.
Okay. I just to kind of, I'm trying to understand. I have friends who engage in self-help books. I think you're referencing some of that with books like The Secret. Where does the science of happiness, how is that actually different? I guess I'm hearing what's wrong. What's different about the science?
Yeah. So first of all, there are a lot of amazing and very important self-help books out there. Where the science of evidence is happiness is different is that it tests all assumptions. And let me give you just a couple of examples, where the assumptions were wrong. One assumption is, success. So, many of the self-help books tell you, you'll achieve all your goals and then you'll be happy. Simply not true. You can achieve all your goals and more, and that will not bring happiness necessarily. Another example is, visualization. So many books write about the importance of visualization. If you can imagine it, you can become it. Whatever you can believe and conceive, you can achieve. All these, very impressive sound bites and promises. Not true. We know that actually just visualizing success in and of itself won't help. What will help? If you visualize the path to success and then the outcome. If you visualize the journey and then the achievement, that may help you may help you more. So these are things that we know because there were experiments that were run, with one group visualizing success, the other one not, the third one visualizing journey and destination. And we saw, who flourished, who thrived.
Well, what do you think it is that kind of drives people to err on predicting what will make them happy? That's kind of our default, it seems.
Yeah, so, a lot of it, we don't know where it starts, but a lot of it is cultural. In the, certainly most people in the West are raised on the notion that success is the path to happiness. Increasingly more, by the way, around the world. We're a global village, and ideas are contagious, and not just good ideas. So we learn it, so we hear it. It also has to do with the fact that people are not that open about their emotions in general. So we see all these, or we read about all these success stories, but we don't see the behind the scenes of these success stories. Once in a while we get a glimpse into the world of very successful people, and we realize, well, not everything is rosy there. Not everything that shines is gold. And we suddenly see, wow, that person just committed suicide, but they had such an amazing life. How could that be? And now more and more people, more and more successful people, some top athletes and musicians and celebrities are coming out and saying, hey, wait a minute, we're struggling with depression. And I think it's such an important message, because what it communicates, if we think about it, is that most of the time have it wrong. It's not success that will lead to happiness.
This is interesting, Tal, because you're a public figure. You're an author. You're here with us today. You're speaking at events and advising. And so what I'm hearing is it might be even more challenging for people in those situations. What is something that you do then to keep yourself kind of grounded? And maybe that's relevant to the folks that are listening.
Yeah, yes, it is relevant, because a human being is a human being is a human being, and there's a lot more that we have in common than is different. So the first thing, the first step to happiness is embracing unhappiness. Now that sounds paradoxical, and I'll share a story with you that I found initially amusing, but later more informative than amusing. So I was the first year that I taught a class on positive psychology at Harvard, I had 8 students. Out of the 8, 2 dropped out, which left me with a broken ego. And I was having lunch one day in one of the undergraduate dorms, and a student comes over, and who wasn't in my class, and says, Tal, may I join you for lunch? And I said, sure. He sits down and we start to chat, and he said, Tal, I hear you're teaching a class on happiness. And I said, yeah, positive psychology. And he said, my roommates are in your class. There were 2 of the 6. And I said, that's great. And he said, but Tal, now that you're teaching this class, you've got to be careful. And I said, what? And he said, Tal, you've got to watch out. And I said, why? And he said, because if I see you unhappy, I'll tell my roommates. And I actually used that in class the following day when I addressed my students, all 6 of them. And I said, the last thing in the world that I want you to think is that I'm always happy, or that you, by the end of the semester, will experience a constant high. There are only 2 kinds of people who don't experience painful emotions like sadness or anger or envy or frustration or anxiety. Only 2 kinds of people. They are the psychopaths and dead people. So if you experience painful emotions at times, it's actually a good sign. It means you're not a psychopath and you're alive. Good place to start. We can build on that. The problem in today's culture is that we do not give ourselves the permission to be human. Why? Part of it is because of the books that are around us, where we don't read reality, where we read that, yes, it's possible if you follow these 5 steps or these 3 ideas, then you'll live happily ever after. And these are false expectations. And what they do is they lead us on the path of unhappiness. Why? Because when we reject painful emotions, if I, for example, experience anxiety, which happens to me at times, and I say to myself, come on, Tal, you shouldn't experience anxiety. You're an expert on happiness. You know what immediately happens then? Anxiety levels skyrocket. They go up. That's the paradox. Or if I say to myself, I shouldn't be envious of my best friend. You know, I'm a virtuous, moral person. Envious? What happens immediately? Envy skyrockets, and it has more control over our behaviors subsequently. We're best off if we accept, embrace painful emotions as part of being human. You know, there's a beautiful poem, Mike, by Rumi, the Sufi poet, called The Guest House. And in The Guest House, Rumi talks about how we need to invite in all emotions, all thoughts as welcomed guests. For when we do, that's when they do not actually overstay their welcome. That's when they do not control our behavior. That's when I can experience envy and still choose to behave generously. This is when I can experience anxiety or fear and still choose to act courageously. Because courage is not about not having fear. It's about having fear and going ahead anyway.
No, that's beautiful. What you're describing, I feel like, is only more challenging, though, in a world where we have quantified value in everything we do. What I mean is, I go and I open up my Instagram app, and I'm told by the interface how valuable I am, how many people liked my photo. I'm scored in that way, and my mind, I imagine it almost changes the way I begin to think.
Yeah. You know, it's related to something we spoke about a few minutes ago, which is about achieving goals and how they won't make us happy. You know, I wrote about this years ago, about the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is that when we arrive somewhere, then we'll be happy. So in this context of, you know, Instagram or you know, social media in general, when I have, you know, 1,000, 1 million followers, then I will be happy. When I'll have so many likes, then I'll be happy. Of course, that doesn't work, because as soon as you have X, you'll want, you know, 2X. And even if you have 10X, that's not enough, because there's always more. And when we are on that treadmill, it's a never-ending race, you know, the rat race. And we actually, paradoxically, the more we get, the less happy we become. Why? You know, there is the myth of Sisyphus from, you know, a Greek mythology, where Sisyphus was banished and punished to push a rock up a mountain. And when he got to the top, you know, the rock was rolled down, and then he would have to go down and push it up again to eternity. You know, this is the myth of Sisyphus. Unfortunately, so many of us today are living the myth of Sisyphus. How? We say to ourselves, okay, so all I need to do is just, you know, get this, achieve this, arrive here. And we arrive, we make it. You know, we win this tournament, or we make this money, or we get so many likes, or whatever it is. As soon as we get there, that rock goes right back down to where it was before. Yes, we experience a relief, a temporary high, but very quickly we go back to the bottom of the mountain. The problem now is that the mountain has just become steeper, because it's not enough to get X likes. It's not enough to make, you know, Y dollars. We need to make 2X, 2Y. In other words, the mountain, the slope becomes steeper. So we're living the myth of Sisyphus, only we're worse off than Sisyphus. You know, he had a constant incline. We have an ever growing incline.
It's kind of funny when I think of platforms like Instagram or Facebook. It's you think in your head cognizantly that you're engaging, you're seeing the lives of other people, but really it's actually a lot about you. You know, you're thinking about, how does my experience compare? And that's why I love Meetup. That's why I work at Meetup. Is when you go to an event and you're engaging with people, you don't got time to think about yourself. You're with others, and you're in person, and you're part of the time you're in person. and you're engaging and hearing others. Uh, we've been talking a lot about the self and person as independently and what's going on in their mind. Um, I, I guess to start thinking about beyond that, in terms of happiness, what can be achieved independently on our own, and what can't? At what point, where does community play into this conversation?
Yeah. Okay, so let me share a study with you, which I'm sure some of the participants here have heard about it, because it did become famous for good reasons. So this is a study that was actually initiated back in 1930. And the study was done by a group of Harvard academics, and they decided to study students from the university, as well as members of the surrounding community. So a few hundred individuals, and they followed them for 75 years. One of the longest running and most extensive studies ever conducted. So after 75 years, not the original researchers, but their children and grandchildren, looked at all the data, and they quite literally had millions and millions of data points that they collected through questionnaires, through physiological measures, through neurological measures, environmental measurements. They looked at all the data that they have, and they asked a simple question. And the simple question was, what is the number one predictor of happiness? Now, there are many predictors to happiness, but what's the number one predictor? And their answer was relationships. Now, the interesting thing, Mike, it didn't matter what kind of relationships, meaning for some, it was a romantic relationship they were involved in for 10 years or 50 years. This was their whole lives. For others, it was their family, nuclear family, extended family. For some, it was their friends. For some, it was colleagues at work, in a workplace they'd been working for a long time. So it didn't matter, but they have close, intimate, supportive relationships. Now, interestingly, there was a second question that these researchers asked. What's the number one predictor of health, physical health? And what they found was many answers. What predicts health? Exercise, of course, matters. Nutrition matters. Where you live matters. But the number one predictor of physical health, once again, relationships. And once again, it didn't matter what kind of relationships. Romantic, friends, work, family. So yes, the short answer to your question is yes. Relationships, community matter a great deal. You also look at the happiest countries in the world. Who are the happiest countries in the world? And not the United States, not the UK, not Germany, not Singapore or Korea. The happiest countries in the world are countries like Denmark, Colombia, Costa Rica, Israel, Australia. Why these countries and not others? Why, for example, countries like Colombia and Israel with a fair share of challenges? So when psychologists looked at what explains the difference between the happiest and the less happy countries in the world, once again, the main determinant, relationships, social support. Where in Denmark, for example, 93% of the population are members of social clubs. And, it could be your church, it could be your yacht club, it could be your mahjong club. It doesn't matter. Active members of social clubs in countries like Israel or Colombia, the family nucleus, very tight, friendships, very tight. In Australia, mate, friendships, relationships are a top priority. That predicts happiness.
It's interesting because earlier you talked about we get a certain buzz when we get a new job or when we start something new, and it can be a distraction. But what I'm hearing is that cool, congratulations on the job, congratulations on the new the new home. But all those things, they do open doors to something that's far more powerful.
Yes.
And that's kind of our challenge to ourselves is to how do we welcome that challenge and engage with people.
Yes, exactly. So, when it comes to work, it's engaging with people. It's finding a sense of meaning at work. When it comes to goals, goals are important, but it's not the achievement of the goals that matter. It's having the goals that matter, and ideally goals that are meaningful to us, that we that provide us with a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. So this is the role of goals, not their achievement, but their existence. It's having rather than achieving that matters more here.
A tone I'm picking up too is, let's say hypothetically, say I have a family member that's not in the best place, and not happy in the way they wish to be happy. What can I do? And what can I do? How much of this is a sense of fault responsibility that falls on the individual?
Yeah. Yes, it's ultimately about the individual, and yet we can help the individual by creating the right conditions for them to grow and feel better. And of course, here I'm not talking about extreme situations. In extreme situations, what we need is professional help. But if someone in my family is feeling down, or a friend is having a hard day or a hard month, there's a great deal that we can do to help. And by the way, what I'm talking about now applies to our friends, and it applies to us as well, naturally. The first thing is to listen. There is a lot of research in the area of leadership. And specifically, I'll elaborate on that because it's very relevant to our times. So back in the 1970s, Robert Greenleaf was looking for the characteristics that define extraordinary leaders. Extraordinary leaders who are essential for extraordinary times. And the characteristic that he identified, the common element to all extraordinary leaders, and he looked at religion, and he looked at politics, and he looked at businesses, was that these leaders saw themselves as servant leaders. Servant leaders, for example, take the organizational chart that has, the CEO on the top and the senior management at the top, and it flips it upside down so that they're at the bottom, serving the rest. That's servant leadership. Now, the most important element of servant leadership, and this is research that was started in the 1970s, still being conducted as we speak, the most important characteristic of servant leaders is their ability to listen. Not how charismatic they are, not their ability to deliver rousing speeches, not how brilliant or strategic they are. It's their ability to listen. Now, when we talk about extraordinary leaders essential for extraordinary times, we don't just mean it for, Fortune 500 companies, because we're leaders at home with our families. We're leaders in our community of friends. We play the role of a leader day in and day out. And especially in extraordinary times, such as times that we're going through now, pandemic, social unrest, what we need more than anything is listening, to listen to others and to be listened to. So that's the first thing. The next thing, just as we talk about, the mind, that, sharing, talking, thinking, we need to also talk about the body, because mind and body are one. So physical exercise. It's amazing research on physical exercise that has come out over the last, 2-3 decades. It's quite literally mind-boggling. Regular physical exercise has the same effect on our psychological well-being. Of course, it affects our physiology, our physical health, but it affects our psychological well-being to the same extent that our most powerful psychiatric medication does. In fact, it works in the same way, releasing norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine. These are the feel-good chemicals in the brain. So regular physical exercise, as little as 30 minutes 3 times a week. and it could be jogging or walking or swimming or dancing, which, by the way, is the most impactful form of exercise, especially if we're dancing in a group, or playing soccer or whatever. As long as we move it. Same effect as our most powerful psychiatric medication. So these are some of the things that that we can do to help others, encourage others to do it, because we're much more likely to engage. We're much more likely to engage in physical exercise if we have someone to do it with, an accountability buddy of sorts.
No, that's great. So I'm hearing a few things: is listening, but also, I'm thinking on the other side too. Maybe if I need someone to listen to me, maybe it means proactively seeking that out. Not feeling ashamed or guilty to go to your neighbor or go to someone near you and have some time to talk, and then exercise and moving.
And the reason why so many people are afraid to talk, are afraid to open up, is because they get the sense that they're the only ones, and they don't want to be the only ones to experience sadness or anxiety. But the reason why people actually feel better when others open up about their problems, it's not because of in German there's the word Schadenfreude, which is reveling in the pain or suffering of others. That's not the case here. The case is that when we hear other people share and talk about their difficulties and hardships, we realize that we're not alone. Mm. Again, what is the power of Meetup? We're not alone, because loneliness hurts. It hurts us psychologically. It hurts us physiologically. So knowing that we're not alone, that other people are in the same boat. She too experiences envy. He too experiences anxiety. Okay, so we're in this together, and that can help us take the first step towards happiness, which is embracing unhappiness.
So we talked about this too. I want to move back to community in a moment. Before that, I'd love to hear, other suggestions or tips of how we can process these negative behaviors, but not let them overcome us.
Yeah. So there are a few ways to process painful emotions. The most common way is to ruminate about it, to think about it. And that turns out, and again, here is the value of research. This is research by Sonia Lubomirsky from the University of California, Riverside. It turns out that this is the worst way to deal with painful emotions, with negative thoughts, to ruminate about them. There are much more effective ways, and let me just mention three. The first one I've already mentioned. Talk about it. Talk about it with others. Talk about it with a professional therapist or coach, or to your best friend. Express it rather than suppress it. And it turns out that talking about it is very different than ruminating or thinking about it in terms of the impact that it has on us. With rumination, we usually go deeper and deeper into it. It gets worse. Talking about it, it gets better. It's like a weight is lifted, of our chest or shoulders. So talking about it is one. Another way, and if we're more introverts or we don't feel comfortable talking about it, which is fine, is writing about it. So there's a wonderful research coming out of initially University of Texas, Missouri, cross-culturally, research on journaling in Japan, in Mexico, South Africa, around the world, showing universally that writing about difficult experiences, whether it's a trauma, whether it's fears that we have, whether it's emotions or thoughts that we're ashamed of, just writing them down privately contributes to our overcoming them and better dealing with them. Now, let me give you an example of a study that was run, and which is, again, very relevant today. So this was done on people who just lost their jobs. They were laid off, and that's associated for many people with painful emotions. Naturally, whether it's anxiety, or how am I going to manage financially, whether it's shame, whether it's fear. And they divided the people who were laid off randomly into two groups. One group went on, business as usual. And of course, they looked for jobs and they went about their lives. The second group wrote about their experience and wrote about how difficult that experience is, about whatever they feel, whether it's the anxiety, whether it's the shame, whether it's the fear, whether it's the frustration or anger, which is another obviously common emotion. They just wrote about it. They wrote about it over a period of 3 days for 20 minutes each day. Not a lot, total of an hour. 6 months, and that was the only difference between the two groups. 6 months later, the group that wrote about it was in a better place psychologically, and they were more likely to have found a new job. Just through journaling, just through processing those painful emotions, that painful experience. So writing about difficult experiences can go a long way. I've been keeping a journal for, I don't know, from the time I could write almost. And, initially it was about, whatever I did that day and, I practicing my writing and today I still write. And, people ask me, so what are you doing differently during the pandemic? Because, like most people, I'm feeling more anxious. I'm feeling more frustrated. So what are you doing differently during the pandemic? And my answer to that, I'm doing more of the same. So I always kept a journal, but whereas before I would journal probably on average twice a month, now at least once a week, I'm writing in my journal because I feel like I need it more. Just like I'm exercising a little bit more. In the past it was 3 times a week. I'm exercising 5 times a week now. So going back to your question, so writing, journaling is another way of expressing and digesting painful emotions. And the third way, in addition to talking and writing, crying. The research on crying is phenomenal. That when we cry, we release certain chemicals. We release opiates, like opium. It's a drug. We release it naturally. It calms us down. We release oxytocin. That's the love hormone. How brilliant is our body? How brilliant is our mind? We have a natural healer. The thing though is we need to let it do its work rather than stop it, block it, suppress it.
That's powerful. And it's counterintuitive to our modern world that everything you said is accessible, is available to us. We can find a pencil somewhere. We can find a space to cry. And we can talk to a stranger in the park.
It's accessible. What we need to do is take time to think about, because this accessibility also has a downside in that we have so much that is accessible to us, so much that is available to us, and FOMO comes into the equation, and we want it all, and that's okay. Once again, that's a natural human desire to have it all, to try it all. What's not natural is that we have so much, because for millions and millions of years we had we had a lot, but we had relatively little compared to today. And today we want to be up to date on everything, and we want to try everything. And there's this new restaurant, and there is this new new opportunity, and we want it all, and we pay a price for it. And what we need to do, and what we try to do then, to have it all through multitasking. And Mike, your generation is a lot better than my generation when it comes to multitasking. Women are a lot better than men when it comes to multitasking. And yet, even the younger generation, male or female, we're all doing too much of it. And what we need is what I've come to call islands of sanity throughout our day. Islands of sanity, these are times where we single task, when we focus on one thing. What's that one thing? It could be being in a meeting. It could be reading. It could be playing ball. It could be listening to music with our eyes closed and just focusing on that piece of music mindfully. It could be meditating. It could be exercise, whatever it is. But having these single tasking activities or islands of sanity, and then we can have, the crazy busy lives that we all have, because these islands will provide an anchor and hence will give us will provide us the energy and the focus to better deal with craziness, with multitasking.
Tal, that's great. We have some really exciting questions coming in.
Please.
I need to get my last one in though, okay? Because I'm very selfish. Meetup organizers, these are people who are they're facilitators of connections and community. They're on this call, they're listening right now. What can organizers do proactively as leaders in their community to inspire happiness among the people they bring together? We talked a little bit about this, but I'm thinking, especially in the context of organizing kind of congregations or communities of people together.
Yeah. The key when it comes to organizing communities is to have choices, healthy choices of communities. So, a community can be 1,000 people getting together around, common interest. A community is also, a group of 10 people who really get to know one another around a common topic, and they share and they open up. Because we're all different. Some of us are introverts, some are extroverts, some like small groups, some are happy to open up in front of the multitudes. And the challenge is to provide healthy community for different needs, which means around different topics, which you're doing, which means different numbers to offer sub-communities within communities. And this is important, Mike, for you and for your colleagues, to remember what you're about. Because, as Meetup grows, as you become busier and busier, it's very easy to forget the essence, the vision, the reason for being. And it happens with many startups, and it happens with many large organizations where and again, I'm talking here from personal experience as well, being an entrepreneur. We sometimes forget, and we need to remind ourselves, wherever we are, whether we are at Meetup or any other organization, what is it about my work that is meaningful? Where do I make a difference in people's lives? And just like we have islands of sanity that help us deal with the difficulties and hardships all around us, we also need moments of purpose that will help us deal with challenges and hardships at work or at home. Friedrich Nietzsche, 150 years ago wrote, when you have a what for, every how becomes possible. In other words, when you connect to your sense of purpose, to your why, you're able to deal with just about any challenge that comes your way.
When I first started a meetup group that I organized, the first events that we hosted, we did a who are we sort of exercises. Every event thereafter, we kick off the event with a reminder of what we decided in those first events. Always kind of regrounding that these were decisions that we made collectively, and this is who we are. This is the people in this space are here for those reasons.
This is why we do what we do.
Yeah. Okay, Anton, he asked a really powerful question. Is there a technique to embracing emotions like anxiety or anger?
Yeah. So the techniques are the ones that I mentioned earlier. You know, writing about it, talking about it, and just shedding a tear. The key to remember when you're applying these techniques, this is very, very important. So I'm glad you brought this up, Anton. Is to understand that there is no good or bad emotion. You know, saying that emotions are good or emotions are bad is like saying that the law of gravity is good or bad. The law of gravity simply is. It's, you know, part of reality, fact of nature. Painful emotions are a part of reality, fact of human nature. So if I experience envy, it doesn't make me a bad person. If I experience anger, it doesn't make me a bad person. The question is what happens with behavior. If I experience envy and then hurt my friend or a stranger, well, you know, that is already within the moral domain. The emotion is not. I'm not a coward if I experience fear. There's no moral evaluation around emotions. And just knowing that, understanding that, can help us truly, really embrace these painful emotions. Now, is it fun? Do I enjoy experiencing anxiety or envy or fear, anger? Of course not. But if I fight it and try to get rid of it, the opposite happens, counterproductive.
Thank you. Linda asked, do you think being grateful has anything to do with happiness? Linda says, I live in below modest means, but I find happiness when I'm grateful for just getting up each day and for what I have. I don't compare my lack of wealth to my happiness. Again, do you think being grateful has anything to do with it?
So, Linda, we don't plant questions, but if I were to plant questions, this is a question I would I would ask to be asked. Thank you. Absolutely, yes. So there's a lot of research on gratitude and well-being. You know, I've been keeping a gratitude journal in particular since the 19th of September, 1999. So I'm coming on, what, 22 years.
Before it was cool.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, just remember that. And the reason I did that was because Oprah told me to do it. So on one of her shows, I'm a big Oprah fan, one of her shows, she talked about a gratitude journal. And I thought, wow, that's cool. So, you know, I shouldn't just write about painful emotions, which I had been doing since I was a child. I'll start keeping a gratitude journal. In 2003, the first studies came out by Robert Emmons, Mike McCullough, and others about the value of keeping a gratitude journal. And you look at the happiest people around you, they're people who are grateful. You know, you speak to the you know, some of the elderly people who are who seem to have lived a full and fulfilling life, and you ask them, you know, what's your secret? So often you will hear, it's just appreciating the little things in life. And you know, there are no little things in life because they are the meaningful elements if we appreciate them. So even when it comes to success, we can multiply the impact of success when we appreciate rather than take for granted. Not to mention multiply the impact of relationships when we appreciate our loved ones, when we appreciate the food on our table, when we appreciate you know, the fact that we're alive. You know, so Irvin Yalom, who's a Stanford professor emeritus, did a lot of research on terminally ill patients. You know, these are people who have 3 to 6 months to live. And one of the findings that he reports on was that very often they would say something to the effect of, for the first time in a very long time, I truly appreciate my life. For the first time in a very long time, I truly appreciate my loved ones or myself or a meal. And the question that begs itself is, do we need to wait for something tragic, external to happen for us to truly appreciate what's already inside us and all around us? And the answer is no. So therefore, you know, creating those islands at night before going to bed or first thing when you wake up in the morning to appreciate for 1-2 minutes is priceless. in the ultimate currency, the currency of happiness.
Mm. Let's see if we can get 2 more questions in the last few minutes that we have together. Clark's got a tough one, and one that came to my mind a little bit, I think probably in a lot of people's minds, in terms of relationships. What about introverts who don't necessarily enjoy relationships with others?
Yeah. So here is the thing about relationships. People enjoy relationships, period, just like people enjoy food, period. And I'm not talking about very extreme cases of illness. People enjoy relationships just like they enjoy food. But just like food, we don't enjoy all food. I may enjoy cucumbers and chocolate, but not oranges and chips. What kind of food do I enjoy? Same with relationships. We all enjoy relationships. The question is, what kind of relationships? And here, the difference between introverts and extroverts matters a lot. So extroverts feel very much at home, in a party. Whereas you look at introverts, you always recognize introverts in a party. And by the way, I'm speaking as an extreme introvert. We're always in the corner in the back, sort of dancing. It's sort of like an awkward sort of movement, with usually just one leg or one foot moving. And because we try to look cool somehow, it just doesn't work. Yes. So these are introverts, and that's okay. Introverts thrive and flourish in small groups. That's what I talked about earlier, Mike, with Meetup. How can you have, also a place for introverts? And by the way, many introverts, and this is research by Yair Amihai Hamburger, who does research on the internet, showing that for many introverts, the internet has been a real blessing in terms of relationships, because they feel more, they are more likely to open up than on social media than they are face to face. So the question is, finding obviously people you connect to in terms of your values. And so that's quality of people that you look for, and also in terms of quantity of people that you look for, introversion versus extroversion. So these are some of the things to think about. But in terms of relationships, again, unless we're talking about the extremes, and I mean extremes, psychopaths, we all need, want, and can derive a great deal of enjoyment from relationships. When I talk about quantity, also in terms of time, some people, they want to be around others 24/7. For others, an hour or 2 a day is ample. Just like there is research showing that relationships are important, we also need to engage in me search that shows what kind of relationships and how much of these relationships is good for me.
Thank you, Tal. Thank you, Clark, for asking that. We're going to get one more in. This is a good note to go out on before we wrap up. Elka asks, how do you know you are happy?
Yeah, it is a good question, and a very difficult one. People ask me, so Tal, we know you started off being unhappy. That's why you got into this field. 30 years hence, are you finally happy? And my answer to that is, I don't know. Because there isn't a point before which we're unhappy, after which we are, before which we're unhappy, after which we're happy. It's not a binary 0-1 thing. Rather, it's a continuum. So yes, today I'm a lot happier than I was 30 years ago, still with the ups and downs, permission to be human, but I'm a lot happier than I was 30 years ago. At the same time, I certainly hope that I will be happier 5 years from now than I am today. This is why, whether it's, the Happiness Studies Academy, in our programs, whether it's my book, I called Happier. I didn't call it Happy, because it's about becoming happier. It's a lifelong journey. It's a journey that ends when life ends. The wonderful thing about this journey is that it's engaging, it's challenging, and it leads us to lead a more full and fulfilling life.
Tal, this was just such a joy to speak with you. I took a lot from this. I know people on this call did. People are going to watch this video. I'm really grateful for your time here. Folks, in the comments, you're going to see a link. Cindy shared a link to Tal's latest book. Definitely check it out, to kind of learn more and explore more on this topic. Again, some of this conversation caught me off guard. It went a direction that I wasn't expecting, and it was really a breath of fresh air. I hope it was for other folks on this call too. Thank you, Tal.
Thank you.
Folks, there's so much here to kind of reflect on. As you're reflecting, something to think about is being active, joining with others, gathering with others, whether that's online or in person. Going on Meetup and finding events near you is one way to do that. Or if you're so inspired, there's an opportunity to kind of begin that community of your own and pass on some of this to others. When you get started, you'll see a discount when you first get started. So that's available for anybody who goes to Meetup and sees the option to go to meetupsavings.com to really get started there. Also, we have our podcast, Keep Connected. You can subscribe meetuppodcast.com, whatever podcast service that you use. It's pretty much everywhere. And I think the next episode is going to have a leader from next door. So there'll be some interesting conversation of two leaders, David Siegel, the CEO of Meetup, and next door, kind of talking on community and togetherness in that way. Again, that's all. Thank you, Tal, so much for your time, and thank you all for joining us and taking your time with us today.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.